Hello and welcome everyone. This is On the Barricades. This is another edition of our show. My name is Bojan Stanislavski and I will be your host today. The usual co-host of the show, Maria Chernat, was not able to make it for the today's recording, but we've got a very special guest for you here. You know him; he's a great friend of the show, and he's a great analyst and a fantastic intellectual with and an activist, long-standing activist with a great record. Someone who is also a specialist in European left's history. He is a frequent guest on our YouTube channel because together with him we run the other show every month. It's called Divided We Fall, where we focus on, well, very generally put, what's wrong with the left and why it keeps losing. But today, of course, we're going to be focusing on the most important element in international politics today, which is the war in Ukraine. But before we dive into that, I want to say hello, Pat.
Hello there, Boyan.
Thanks for coming on the program. Well, the situation is extremely difficult, and as much as I hate, speaking about emotions, especially when it comes to public matters, I have to admit, I have to confess that I'm absolutely devastated at you know what's going on. I'm devastated and heartbroken to see this war between two brotherly fraternal nations, one nation really. I mean, I don't quite see how anyone in their right mind could argue that there are any major differences between nations like, Belarusians, Russians, Ukrainians, or for that matter, Serbs and Croats. That's also a conflict which occurred which I was able to witness, which I was able to see, and I had to consume. Of course, not as a victim, not as a. I haven't participated in that in any way. But I'm Bulgarian by birth, so I come from the Balkans, and I consider all the nations of the former socialist Yugoslavia to be brotherly to the one that I was born into, which is the Bulgarian one. And again, I mean, no real differences between Serbs and Croats, no real differences between Bulgarians and Northern Macedonians now. So this is an extremely traumatic experience. Of course, not as much as for the people who are the actual victims of the military conflict that is going on right now. Nonetheless, I just have to state that it's devastating to see that Eastern Europe becomes once again a theater of war, and that this time it's obviously a geopolitical clash between the United States and Russia, or between the United States and Russia and China. We're going to talk about that, and Ukraine is just the kind of casus belli. It's not really about the very Ukraine. It's not really about all those things that are said. But it's really difficult, and I think it's very traumatic also for many people around here. I mean, we're in the country where I reside, Poland. This is just for many people it's like their wounds, their traumatic historical wounds, they start to bleed again, and that also has a very specific result on the atmosphere, on the climate, on the social reaction, so to say. It becomes increasingly, it has been increasingly unhinged over the last 72 hours, in particular, but pretty much since the beginning of that war, which occurred. Let me remind our viewers, it all started on Thursday last week at 5:30. This is when the Russian military was given orders to begin what the Russian authorities refer to as special peacekeeping operation to denazify and to demilitarize Ukraine in order to protect the people of Luhansk and Donetsk. Uh, and well, as for now, I want to say that I have seen no signs of denazification, whatever it is supposed to mean. Clearly, no demilitarization. On the contrary, the conflict in terms of the military clashes is there. We can see that occurring in the southeast, mostly of Ukraine, south of the Luhansk, of the territory of what is referred to as the Luhansk People's Republic, close to the city of Mariupol, which is the largest harbor city in Ukraine. Then there is this surrounding of Kiev, and there are some fights still going on in Kharkov, the second largest city in Ukraine. But I have to say that those are probably going to finish very soon, because the front has moved already way beyond Kharkov towards the Ukrainian heartland, and we can expect quite soon the Russian military advancing towards Odessa, which is on the Black Sea, that is south of Ukraine, and it seems like, well, judging by the information that is there on in the Western and in the Russian media, that's the only way I can get any information. There's no way for me to, of course, verify it or corroborate it. So, like, this is what we know so far, that the Russian military is probably going to soon surround the whole region of Odessa, which is Odessa to the north, along the border with Moldova, and this is how they're going to open the road, the kind of the access that they're going to open access to Transnistria, which is the region of Moldova that is, well, just very briefly, friendly to Russia. Uh, okay, so this is the situation we're in right now, and I invited you, Pat, because I value your analysis. I think you're one of the very few people on the socialist left who have remained sharp in this situation, and who can offer not only rational perspective on things, not only some historical examples and analogies, but also uh, you know can give the kind of Marxist perspective, the classical Marxist perspective on them, which is something that is obviously missing in the debate, and I think it's extremely important to have that kind of perspective discussed. So, Pat, please, the mic is yours.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Boyan. I don't know if I justify some of these superlatives. Certainly not fantastic intellectual. I don't really consider myself an intellectual, more an activist in that sense. But I try to approach these things from a practical point of view as well as theoretical one. And I'd like first of all to echo your sadness at the tragedy that this represents. Um, and I'd like to make it very clear that from the outset that that I like you, I'm very opposed to this invasion of Ukraine by Russia, because this is this is basically the use of force to try and achieve policy and regime change, and this is exactly what we argue against when the Americans do these things,
Yes, exactly. The Russians
and
have
when
adopted
the
American standards now, haven't they?
They have, yeah. They've kind of imitated the worst behaviour of the Americans and the Europeans, and I don't think that is a good look at all. More importantly, of course, is the victims of this. So this war, whatever the outcome, will lead to obviously loss of many lives, um, injuring far more, and it will shatter the hopes of many of Ukrainian and Russian families. It lead to millions of people having to leave their homes,
Yeah,
destroying the
already
economy.
350,000 people have crossed the border from Ukraine to Poland,
Sure,
and
sure,
there are already refugees in Romania, in Bulgaria. So we're talking about massive exodus.
sure. Well, I mean, the UN isn't it? The UN said about 7 billion, or the EU said about 7 million people having to leave. So, you can see the scale of this. And and then will it be possible for them to come back? And will they want to come back? The whole disruption. You'll probably have families who are Some will stay, some might come. It's going to rip apart all kind of
Yeah, absolutely. We don't really
situations.
know. We don't really know what's going to be left of Ukraine
Right.
as we know it or as we
I
knew
know.
it. Really,
So
we
yeah,
have
I
no
mean this.
idea. We have no idea
Yeah.
what the end game here is like. Is Vladimir Putin going to take, I don't know, half of Ukraine, the whole of Ukraine? Is he
Well,
going to partition it? What?
we'll come on to that. But I
Yeah.
think the war, without doubt, the war is definitely going to destroy a lot of Ukraine's
And
economy,
once
the
again, we
environment,
oppose it. We strongly
yeah.
oppose it and condemn this aggression.
I mean, it's going to be damaging, very damaging to the environment of the country. It's going to waste huge billions and billions of money on arms. And in fact, I would argue that far from denazifying Ukraine, this war is likely to increase the ethnic hatreds and reactionary attitudes that underlie Nazism on both sides, both in Ukraine and in Russia. And
Yeah,
it's going to
and
leave
by the way,
behind,
I want to say
yeah,
that I want to add here that I made that point in our previous programs. I mean, not with you, but with other guests that we had. That as much as the Russians can, repeat
mm,
this talking point that it's not against the population of Ukraine, that it's against this Banderite regime, like whatever, however you want to refer to those authorities that were
mm,
created after
mm,
the 2014 coup. It's like they could believe that, but when people break into your home with machine guns in their hands, you don't come to think about like whether they like the government or whether you like the government or what is your political position on this or that. You just hate them, and it's because you want to survive, and they are your enemies. And even many Ukrainians, I believe, who have a very favorable attitude towards Russia, they might shift actually towards some kind of
mm,
stance which is exactly in
sure.
line with the nationalistic Ukrainian nonsense. So, and as you said, like in Russia, it could strengthen such attitudes as well. So this is like a lose-lose situation from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's the right wing right wing nationalists are not unique to Ukraine. There's a lot of them
No.
in Russia. In fact, a lot of the core support for Putin is right wing nationalism. So it's and if, I think that this will just fan the flames of that, and it'll leave behind hatreds that can last for generations.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah.
people, I mean, one of the ironies is really, if you talk about it, is that it's one set of right wing oligarchs in Russia invading another set of right wing oligarchs in Ukraine. That's the truth of it, you know.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
and the only people who are likely to gain from this are those oligarchs, the elites on the winning side, and the arms manufacturers in Ukraine and internationally. They're the people who gain out of this,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the
I think
people of
I think
Russia
that
or
that's true.
Ukraine.
That's true. By the way, globally, I would say that what all those geniuses in Washington and Brussels have have basically prepared for us. Like I'm talking about all those wars of aggression that have occurred over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, Iraq. You don't have enough time for me. Okay, now to go
Sure.
through all the list. But what I'm trying to say is that all those wars of aggression that they have carried out, they've done that with the feeling of complete impunity, that no one can ever strike back, that no one will ever dare to somehow
Yeah.
challenge their hegemony and supremacy, or however you want to refer to that, right? Like many words of this sort are being shuffled right now. But now the situation seems to be somewhat different, okay, from like in this sense. Now they
Well,
seem to,
yeah.
to
I
be
mean,
bound to take down Russia or China, and this is Russia or China. They are not Iraq or Libya or
yeah.
Syria.
So I think there's an. I mean, uh, having said what we've said, why we're against this war. Um, that doesn't mean to say that Russia didn't have strong reasons to object to the way it's been treated over recent
Mm.
decades. We'll come on to those,
Yeah,
including the
sure, sure.
expansion of NATO and all the sanctions that have been levied against Russia, the way they've been treated by the Americans and so on. And of course, the way that the Russian people have been discriminated in Russian speaking people in Ukraine. But that doesn't obviously justify this
More.
invasion, clearly, yeah. And in my view, Russia could have followed a very different path, which eventually would have succeeded in overcoming the problems, but without the use of this aggressive military action. So I think that that's the problem. It's not that Russia didn't have any grounds for complaint. Definitely they did. And as you pointed out, all these examples of the way the Americans have just bombed and invaded country after country without any blowback. Um, it's not. There's so much hypocrisy. I mean,
Mhm.
I watched that UN debate yesterday, and it was sickening. They were getting up there and attacking Russia's actions in Ukraine. Okay,
Mhm.
but they don't have to. They don't mention a thing about what all the Wests have been doing and
Yeah,
bombing,
but
invading, whatever.
I would say even more. They wouldn't even mention the 14,000 people that have died during the 8 years of war, on
Well,
and
yeah,
off
of
war on
course,
the contact line
yeah,
between Ukraine and those
sure.
self-proclaimed republics. Okay, so that's
But I mean,
like
they were.
history didn't
I'm
start
just
15
taking.
minutes ago.
I know. I'm just taking them on their own arguments. They were.
Mm,
They were saying we must uphold the Charter of UN. Charter of Rights and so
mhm,
on. But they don't mention about the fact that this is constantly being broken by the leading Western powers. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, even there was one chap guy who got up and he said, "Well, okay, we know that it's been broken many times, but we mustn't be. There's no point in justifying this invasion in terms of things that have been done badly in the past." But the reality was, on the very day of the debate, there was actually the UN declaration was being broken by a number of Western powers. And so, for example, in the last week, we've had bombing by Israel in Syria,
mhm.
breaking the UN rules. We've had bombing by Saudis in Yemen,
Yeah, man. Yeah.
breaking the UN rules. We've had bombing in Somalia by the USA, breaking the UN rules. So it's just a farce.
Mhm.
You can't apply a rule only to one particular situation and not to all the
Yeah, but
others.
I also got to
You
say
know,
that there's a pinch of Western chauvinism here. I mean,
of
because like
course.
obviously everything that the Western powers agree on, that it is like whatever, it's justified violence, that it could be it could be called anything, like again a peaceful peacekeeping operation or anti-terrorist operation, something like that. Then it's okay, and it doesn't even deserve a mention in the UN or anywhere or in the media for that matter, right? But now when Russia does it, and of course, like again, I condemn Russia for doing this, and I condemn the Russian government. I think, just as you said, that there have other ways, other leverages could have and should have been adopted and used here. But anyway, we're going to get to that.
I mean, the other thing that struck me at the listening to that debate in the UN was, the sanctions that they're levying against Russia. These are totally illegal. I
Yeah,
mean, people don't
yeah,
realize that the
yeah.
United
Thank you for
Nations,
saying that. Yeah.
yeah, that the United Nations in its Declaration of Human Rights declared sanctions to be illegal, as sanctions are a version of war, economic war, and that
Yeah.
they can lead to actual physical war as well. And the Americans just they're sanctioning something like 37 countries at the moment,
Hmm.
all of
Yeah.
which is illegal and has not been authorized by the Security Council. So what the heck? Not only that, the delivery of arms into the situation in Ukraine, that in of itself is pouring fuel onto a fire.
That is crime against humanity, really, because to
You know,
send people, to send people who have very little training or next to none training,
yeah, it's
to
ridiculous.
fight a professional army is just, it's absolutely horrendous, as an
Hmm.
idea, as a concept, and yeah, I have argued from the beginning, really, that the only solution, provided the proportion of power between the Russian and the Ukrainian army, and provided that the NATO countries, which is the only good thing here, maybe have clearly stated that they would not intervene in this war. Uh, the only way forward is to really lay down arms, which is something that the Russian general staff has called for. That the Ukrainian soldiers that lay down arms, they will be provided security corridors, and that they will be treated humanely, and that they will be allowed to reunite with their families, and that many of them will
Hmm.
be covered by an amnesty law that is to be introduced after the military operation or war, or whatever we want to refer to it, ends. So I really feel that, and I really, I'm I feel terribly uncomfortable emotionally even saying that, but this is the fact. This is truth. The truth. I mean, everyone probably, like, unless something unexpected, totally unexpected happens, but provided the proportions between the Russian and the Ukrainian army, anyone who takes up arms against the Russian army advancing, they will be dead within a minute, within an hour, within a day, within a week, within, I don't know, a month, maybe. I don't know how long the war is going to last. But this is a tragedy that, soldiers, Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, are dying and will be dying at each other's hands. This is something. I mean, really, I don't want to
I mean that.
exaggerate here, but you got
I
to be
mean
from Eastern
it's.
Europe to actually understand
I
this.
can. I can. And I mean the other thing, if you look at it, is actually that the West are using, just as America has used Ukraine as a pawn, right, in its battle with Russia
Yeah.
over the last 20, 30 years. Um, they, they are also the Western powers. They talk very bravely,
Mm.
right? But they're not willing to commit their troops, and I don't think they should. But they're willing to let the Ukrainians die for them. And they're
Yeah,
going
as
to,
one as
they
one of the
supply,
guests
they're
on
going
our
to,
yeah, as one of the guests on our
yeah.
program said, that the Americans are prepared to fight the Russians until the last Ukrainian soldier. That's
Exactly, yeah. So, and they're going to supply as many weapons. I mean, I don't know if the weapons are really going to get to the soldiers because, most of the big battles are in the east anyway, and how they're going to get
and most of the
weapons in
Ukrainian
time.
army is being encircled right now in the
I would
southeast.
imagine,
So
yeah, exactly, yeah. But I
but there
mean,
is a lot of talk, though. There is a lot of talk, though.
Mhm,
Please let me make that point. Perhaps you
sure.
would like to comment on that a little later. But there's a lot of talk now, and I can see that even this idea was floated some time ago, and I just dismissed it because I thought it's crazy. And I thought it's absolutely unhinged that the West would sponsor and train some kind of guerrilla movement in
Hmm.
Ukraine.
Hmm.
And there's more and more talk about that. Even today I read some headlines. I wasn't able to go through the articles yet, but if they really decide to do something like that, I don't even want to think of what reality we're going to wake up into in a couple of weeks
like
from
a
now.
Syria
Yeah,
type situation.
yeah,
You mean?
yeah.
I mean that thing is that we saw. It's one thing. It's one thing for the Ukrainians to be defeated, right, and Russia to take over, and then there be some things imposed on them, right. But to turn the whole country by this kind of method into a Syria situation where the majority of the people will all be forced out and everything will be destroyed. Jesus, I mean, what the hell? But
Yeah,
anyway, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the trouble is though that this not only all the damage to the actual people of Ukraine by all this operation, but it's also from the point of view of the left. This is a pretty disastrous development. I mean,
Absolutely.
we're seeing a carnival of reaction. You know, Putin's invasion has bolstered the reactionary forces internationally. And we've seen that from Russia went from being seen as a kind of the wounded party and the victim
Mm.
until a few weeks ago, and has now been transformed by this action into the aggressor and the villain. And it's united the European powers more closely with the US. In many ways, it's played into the American hands. Um,
Absolutely, I agree with you.
and it's strengthened NATO. NATO now is in the position where it may actually get some new members in Europe.
Mm. Mm.
So Finland's talked about joining NATO, and one or two other neutral states have talked about joining NATO. Not only that, it's led to many countries increasing their weapons purchases. For example, Germany, which is a very dangerous development, is now
Yeah.
going to completely rearm, um, and it's going to increase its budget right now by 100 billion euros. That's a lot of money, and
Hmm.
it's going to increase its budget to 2% of GDP, and a lot of other
Which is
countries are
something
doing the
that Trump
same.
wanted and never managed to achieve, really.
Exactly, exactly. So this is um, this is really damaging. To many things that Russia says it wants to fight, didn't
Yeah,
want to happen.
yeah.
I mean, Europe, in many ways, Europe was divided. Germany was trying to soften the line, and France was trying to soften the line. The trouble was they didn't have the courage to stand up to America. But
Mm.
nevertheless, there was divisions in Europe. Now they've united them all. and they're on the warpath. So this is
Yeah, yeah.
really
I
a
would
very
like us
bad
to later
development.
talk a little bit about how it actually, the build up to the
Sure.
history, and then the build up, because I think it's
Right.
also very important for us to be informative for our
Right.
viewers and listeners. But anyway, we are going to do that in the second segment of the program. This was
Right.
just the introduction, and I want to thank everyone watching and listening. I want to remind you that we run a Patreon account, patreon.com/the Barricade, and that we are here for you. We are the independent leftist Eastern European media. Please support us. Thank you so much for being with us for the first segment, and we are going to see each other very soon. Thank you, Pat.
Good.